was about 10 years old. I went to one of my best friend's houses to hang out and then have a sleepover. I stayed over at his place all the time, and he occasionally stayed over at my place as well. His name was Robert, and we were both really into sports and played on the same football and baseball teams. Robert's dad would always throw to us football passes or pitch batting practice to us at his house, which was always fun. But on this time, he was out of town on business. Anyways, on this particular night, we played video games like we often did, until Robert's mom came upstairs to his room and told us both that it was time for bed. We both got ready for bed, and Robert went into his bed and I got in my sleeping bag on the floor. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but woke up sometime later. I groggily turned over to my other side and got comfortable again. It was pitch black, but my eyes slowly adjusted. As they did, I noticed a man in the hallway just outside of Robert's room. I assumed it was Robert's dad, and then I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. The next morning, Robert and I got up and had some cereal. He mentioned that his dad was coming back home today, and that's when I suddenly remembered about the man I had seen in the hallway last night. It hit me that it couldn't have been Robert's dad, as he was out of town. I thought maybe I was dreaming the whole experience, but I really just knew that I wasn't. I told Robert about it, and he seemed really surprised. We told his mom about it too, and after a conversation with me and Robert, we decided to look around the house. I don't know if he fully believed me. We went around the house and started seeing if any windows or doors were open. We eventually got to the basement, the spare bedroom that they had. When we looked inside, we saw it was a complete mess. Robert was shocked and said they hadn't left it like this, and it had been cleaned the last time he saw it. He also said that they didn't really go in that bedroom much, and the door was usually shut. We suddenly both got the creeps and ran back upstairs and told his mom. She went down and then returned back upstairs a short time later, saying she was calling the police. A while later, the police showed up and searched the house. They didn't find the man, but a window in the guest bedroom to the basement was left open. I don't know if the man was already gone or if he left when he heard us talking about it, but it appeared he had been living in the guest room for several days. A few weeks ago, I helped my friend John move one weekend from an apartment to a small house on the other side of town. It was a pretty tough job and it was just the two of us, so it took us a while. By the time we were almost done, it was pretty late at night and we were both exhausted. John had a spare bed that we had moved into the basement. He told me I could sleep there for the night and then we could finish up in the morning. I took him up on his offer because I really didn't want to drive the 10 minutes back to my place as tired as I was. Plus, we still had a few things left to move. It was a pretty comfortable bed he had down there, and it felt great to lay down and close my eyes. I was starting to drift off when I noticed some noises. It sounded like something moving around down there, but I couldn't tell where the sounds were coming from exactly. I looked all around the basement and didn't see anything at all. It was sort of creepy, but I tried my best to just ignore it. The noises continued though, and I thought maybe it was mice or something, which was pretty gross, but as tired as I was, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, after I woke up and went upstairs, John asked me how I slept down in the basement. I told him it was good, but I mentioned the noises I had heard. He then told me that he too had heard noises as well coming from what sounded like the basement, but figured it had to be me making the noises. He said he also heard noises in another area of the house as well. I think we both got a little creeped out by this, but we figured it had to be a mouse, and went on with the job of moving the rest of his stuff. I was moving a few of the last boxes to the basement, and I guess I was carrying too many and dropped one of the boxes on the floor. When I went to pick it up, I noticed something. In the corner of the basement, sort of under the stairs, there was a little handle sticking out of the floor. It was hard to see, and something that you wouldn't pick up unless you looked really close because of how hidden it was. I told John to come over and take a look. He looked closely and then pulled on the handle, and it lifted up a sort of trap door leading to a hidden room in the house. The room was very small, but there was a sleeping bag in it, as well as a few water bottles that were empty. It appeared someone had been living in there, but nobody was there at the moment. Me and John put two and two together from the noises we had heard and were pretty creeped out. We searched the house but found no one. After that, we reported the room and how someone had been living in it. Whoever had been living there never did return. They must have left for good after realizing we were there. Years ago, when I was 12 years old, there was a kid at my school named David who invited me over one day for a sleepover. It was kind of random and I was sort of surprised by it, because I didn't really know David all that well. We had talked a few times here and there, and he had been new to the school the year before, but we never really hung out at all. I told him I didn't know, but he persuaded me, so I said all right and I asked my mom when I got home from school. She said yes and drove me to his house after school that Friday. It was my first time being at David's house, and I was still kind of surprised that he invited me over, but I thought it was cool to be making a new friend. He showed me around his house, which was very nice, and we played some video games. David overall just seemed a little bit strange to me. I didn't really know what exactly it was, but I felt like I just didn't really get along with him. We had sort of different interests and things like that, and he just didn't really seem like the kind of guy I would hang out with. Finally, it was time for bed, and I got in my sleeping bag on the floor of David's room, which was a pretty decent-sized bedroom for a kid. It took me a while to fall asleep, but eventually I did, only to be woken up a few hours later. I woke up super sweaty and realized that my sleeping bag was completely zipped up and another blanket was covering my head. I took them off and immediately felt a nice feeling of cooler air. I looked around knowing I for sure didn't put that extra blanket on myself. I thought maybe David did, but why would David do something like that? I looked over and saw David was awake. I asked him why he put a blanket on my head, but he denied it. I knew he was lying, but when I accused him again, he got pretty angry at me. I decided to just try to go back to bed and make it through the rest of the night, and I could go back home in the morning. I was finally able to get back to sleep, and when I woke up, it was morning. When I did, I looked around, but David wasn't in the bedroom. I figured he must have gone to the bathroom or something, so I waited there for a few minutes. Eventually, I really had to pee, so I got up to leave the room, but the door wouldn't open. It seemed to be locked from the outside. This was the last straw for me. I was pretty annoyed with how David was acting towards me, and I called my mom on my phone and asked her to come pick me up. I didn't have a good time at all, but I was still glad, I guess, that I gave it a chance to make another friend. David, by this point, just seemed really strange to me. My mom told me she would come and get me, so I knocked on David's door and called out to him that it was locked, but nobody came. I knocked several more times and even shouted once. I told him I was locked in his room, but I got no response once again. David's house was pretty big, so there's a chance I wasn't heard, but the whole thing just made me really angry. Finally, David's mom opened the door to his bedroom and told me that my mom was here to pick me up. The way she said it, she sounded almost annoyed. And that was another thing that was sort of strange to me, is that David's parents were kind of unfriendly. I was just happy to go home, though, and I left without even seeing David at all. It was a Saturday, so I spent the rest of the day just hanging around the house and playing some video games. That night, however, I was in my bedroom, and my mom called out to me that one of my friends was there. I walked out and saw David standing at the front door. He did not look happy. I walked over to him, and he angrily asked me why I left his house so early without even saying bye to him or anything. I told him he locked me in his bedroom, and I didn't even know where he was. He then denied it and responded by calling me a horrible friend and storming off. I really didn't care, though. I just went back inside and started playing video games again. But about 15 minutes later, I suddenly heard the sound of glass breaking coming from my window. It scared me badly, and I just about had a heart attack. I looked over to my window and saw glass everywhere. Then I saw a rock tumble to the ground. My parents came running into my room and saw the glass. I was all right, and I wasn't near the window. My parents ran over and looked out the window to see David running away down the street. David had thrown the rock through my bedroom window, breaking it. My parents called his parents, and I remember hearing them argue for a little bit before finally hanging up. I don't really know what happened to David after that, but I never saw him at school again.